May I be recognized, Mayor?
Yeah, let me just say one thing. Just so residents y'all understand how it normally works, we normally create a budget as it relates to department heads. They create their own budget. They talk about the items they want or improvements, buy trucks or add money into tree trimming, just giving you examples of things. And then they normally give it to the trustees. If the trustees are doing their jobs by having committee meetings, they have a committee meeting and talk about the budget. Then they'll come before us, meaning the entire body, and then we'll make a vote on the budget. Those are the actual steps. So we're not up here doing what we're doing before you. Now, what I'm saying is we haven't done any of that. Well, I ain't gonna say we because they are over their own committees. They schedule their own dates and time for you guys to come out and go over a budget. That has not been done. So that's why you see us going back and forth over who do what. But I'm just telling you the lay of the land and how it should have worked. Go ahead, trustee.
Just for the record, and the reason I guess I want all of the citizens to know why we're so adamant about this budget and what's going on. May 12th, 2021, a resolution was passed. The following persons are hereby authorized to be added as signatories for all city accounts: Mayor Tiffany Henyard, Village Clerk Allison Key. Any prior signatories or individuals authorized and hereby removed from the accounts prior authorization is revoked. Number of signatures required are a combination of both signatures. At the approval of payment by the village board, each check shall be signed by the mayor and the clerk. We have a $500,000 check signed by Mayor Tiffany Henyard. Y'all wonder why we worried about the money? This is why we worried about the money. $561,000 check with one signature on there. It's a problem. That means that money is being spent, and after we don't find out till after the check's been cashed. That's why we're up here complaining about it.
A lot of people have been asking, whatever happened to that $561,000 check? Well, today, you're about to find out when I tell you about the phone call.
Crunching on the gravel, me stacking. Paying the streets, boss man's making plays. The track is whispering, cause they know we get paid. Break it down, hands dirty, break it, cash is clean. Back exit right here, go collecting that green. The trying last sloppy, yapping it low. Out of it now, let it up below. Rockets fat, from the kickbacks. We stacking it high, never looking back. Counting bracks, on racks. City life, we got it on track. Trinos humming, jackhammers beat the block. Late asphalt, time is money on the clock.
What is up, gang? It is I, Carlton Flowers, of the Go Political Channel. And tonight, we are back on the topic of corruption and kickbacks in the village of Dolton. So, we're about to put an old story to rest. Yep, the story about the $561,000 check. Since there have been a lot of people here recently wondering, whatever happened to that dadgum check? Well, I'm going to fill you completely in on exactly what I found out that happened to that check. So we're going to talk about corruption and kickbacks as it relates to Tiffany Henyard and this check. And then we're going to have to clear up some false allegations and show some additional evidence and then reveal what I found out about this check from my own investigation. All right, so anyway, let me give you a little bit of background. If you don't know anything about this, I'm going to give you the quick and dirty version. So back in 2021, 22, whenever it was, the mayor allegedly cashed this check that was made out to a contractor in the amount of $561,000 and change. And so The big deal was it only had one signature, her signature, and the check is supposed to have the mayor's signature and the clerk, like two people signing every check. It only had one, and additionally, as you saw in the clip, this amount was not approved on the warrant list. So some Facebook influencer turned YouTuber, content creator, puts out this vague-ish story where he didn't like come straight out and say it, but basically he made a post on Facebook inferring that she had stolen the check by cashing it at a check cashing place down in the hood in Dolton. And so that happens to be a business owned by this gentleman by the name of Lon Goodman, owner of Currency Exchange. So he had gone on to say that Lon Goodman, the owner of that Currency Exchange business, was raided by the FBI or investigated and arrested. He showed a picture of Lon Goodman getting arrested, put in cuffs, and he said that this was the result of him cashing out the check for Mayor Tiffany Henyard. Well, guess what? That story was entirely false. Lon Goodman did get arrested. That part is true. But the arrest warrant was actually issued by the Northern District of Ohio Federal Court. The Northern District of Illinois was just the one that sent the goons out to go get him, but then he had to go to Ohio, where he was facing charges relating to none other than engaging in a bankruptcy fraud scheme. Does that sound familiar? So the allegations involved making false statements in his bankruptcy petition to conceal his assets, his sources of income, as well as a significant claim that he lied about that was against him to make it look like he was more poor. So anyway, he was released on an unsecured bond of $10,000 and went to court in Ohio. That was that. He's out of business. So it had nothing to do with cashing this check. And anyway, the story never made sense to me because what kind of check cashing business in the hood has $561,000 sitting around in cash? I mean, come on, people. If you're in the hood, you got $500,000 stacked up. How long do you think it would be before somebody breaks the door down and robs that place? So that doesn't happen. I mean, even in my hometown, the biggest bank in my town, okay, where I bank, they don't keep more than $30,000 in the vault at any given time. $30,000, and that's a big bank. So that was complete bunk, claiming that he whips out $500,000 over the countertop. I just can't believe everybody fell for that and believed it. So complete hogwash. And plus, you can't cash a check that isn't written to you. So everyone just jumped to the conclusion that because they saw the mayor's signature on it, that it meant she cashed it. But the signature's on the front of the check. When's the last time you signed the front of a check to cash it? Right. On the front of the check, it's made out to you. Then you endorse the back of the check. So when you look at the check again, who's it written out to? K5 Construction. Who endorsed it? The mayor. And then K5 has to take it to the bank and sign the back of the check, not the front. So it never made sense anyway. But of course, a bunch of other YouTube content creators read that Facebook post and believed the story, and then they just ran with it. One of them is a big one. You probably know who he is. He resides in Africa, and he must have mentioned this story 3 or 4 times. And I kept commenting on his videos, dude, this is totally not true. These are false allegations. But of course, I never got a comment back because he has hundreds of thousands of followers. So anyway, it's just too bad that that happened. So that's what encouraged me to do some digging and investigate on my own to find out what really happened. So I contacted my good buddy Ed Steve in Dolton to see if he could ask the trustees if they would call the bank, the contractor's bank, or call their bank, and see if they could track it down and find out if the check was deposited. Okay. But after reviewing the footage of the next clip you're going to see, it's not even really necessary because it's obvious. Well, you make the call. You see if you can tell what happens here and if you would agree with me that that check was deposited. So let's cut to the clip.
So right, exactly. I like how people throw numbers up here and say I signed a check. What is it?
So are you saying that you didn't sign it?
What's the check I signed?
It's for the construction, but it wasn't approved until you signed it and they cashed it.
Construction? Go ahead. What construction?
It's for an asphalt company, but you signed it and they cashed it before we approved it. I don't care how you want to say it.
You can word it however you want. You can lie on me. You
didn't do what you were supposed to do.
When it
It's a
comes to
process.
things, I always
That's
do
the
what I'm supposed
issue.
to
It's
do.
a process. You're not following the process.
I always
That's
follow
why
the
we had an
process.
issue.
I always follow the process.
You don't.
But anyway, go ahead. Moving
Exactly.
on. I said what I said. You said what you said. You're lying. Period.
So I'm lying about the check,
You
Mayor.
are lying.
I have copies
So
of it.
now-
If anybody want a copy of it, I have a copy of it.
Okay, you got it all out.
Isn't it funny how Tiffany Henyard will sit there and tell a bald-faced lie when the evidence is like sitting right in front of her face? I mean, she's like the type of person who would urinate on your head and convince you that it's raining. You know the type. You know I'm telling you the truth. So anyway, I think what Belcher was really saying was that the check was deposited, not literally cashed. Okay, so maybe that's also why people just blindly believed the Facebook influencers' vague story. It might even still be there if you want to go back and look at it. I still wanted to verify, though, that the check was actually deposited, even beyond this. So I decided to continue on with my own investigation, and I decided to do something very bold. I mean, if we want to verify if the check was actually deposited, then why don't we just call the contractor? All right, guys, so this is where it gets really good. The phone call. I had to work up a lot of nerve to pull this off, but hang with me here, and I'm going to read from my notes over here and tell you the story of how this went down. I promise you, this is gonna be good. So, I called the K5 Construction Company, and I had a very interesting conversation with the girl who picked up the phone, who was the secretary. So it took me a couple minutes of small talk to kind of get her to warm up to me, which she quickly did. Now, I don't know when the piece of heavy equipment rolled into the office, but I digress. I asked her if the company knew about a $561,000 check that has been talked about all over social media, and if that money ever made it to them. So she said that she didn't know anything about it, and after, being slightly defensive at first, she came around and she was really super nice to me after she realized that I wasn't implicating K5 Construction, but that, hey, I was just trying to look out for them. So after telling me and understanding the whole story, she got the gist of it, and she told me that she couldn't help, but she said she could get me in to someone who was working in the finance department who would know the answer. So the secretary was very friendly, very cheerful, and just super glad to help me out. And I was just really feeling confident, by this time, because we had a great conversation, and I felt like, hey, I'm about to get to the bottom of solving this whole crazy issue. So she forwards me to the finance department. Now, the lady in the finance department that she sent to me, well, let's just say that she wasn't quite the same. She was very cold and unfriendly, and it took me several minutes of buttering her up, using my best charm just to get her talking. So I told her that I was a retired highway design engineer here in Missouri, and I was very familiar with a lot of big contractors, just to make myself a little bit more relatable. And I told her that I had heard great things about K5 Construction and how awesome of a contractor they are and how they do outstanding work before she finally started to open up a bit. So I mentioned that I was an independent reporter of sorts and that I was just looking for some information. So once she let her guard down a little bit and started to open up, I gave her the same story, asking about the $561,000 check that was written to K5 Construction that was circulating all over social media and the news, and that it was supposedly cashed by the mayor of Dolton and pocketed. So I asked her if she was aware of it. So she immediately went from kind of lukewarm to icy. So she said she was not aware of it at all. And she even sounded annoyed with me. So I told her it's been reported all over the news. And she asked me, well, what channel was it? And I said, WGN? And then she said, well, who was the reporter? So I got all nervous. I completely blanked out and I could not remember of the famous WGN reporter that everyone knows the name of. But I repeated that, well, it's been on the news. It's been all over social media. So attempting to keep the conversation going and try to pry for more information, I asked her if K5 does any tree trimming work for Dolton, for the village of Dolton, because I knew that there was a ton of tree trimming going on there. So she responded and said that the company does not do any tree trimming work and that they're mainly a roadwork contractor doing asphalt and concrete work. So I said, oh, okay, well, maybe that's it. Have you guys done some street work or sidewalks for the village of Dolton? And she answered, telling me that, well, we do contract work all over the state of Illinois. But she wouldn't say anything about Dolton specifically. So I brought the conversation back to the check, and I told her that I figured they'd be very interested to know about this if somebody was cashing a $500,000 check that had their company name on it. And again, she said that she wasn't aware of any issue with a check like that. So I asked again, does K5 do road work for the village of Dolton? And I asked her if she could look up the actual contract that maybe matched the amount of the check. And she told me that if I wanted to view any of the contract work that K5 has been involved in, all of the information is on Google. So she told me to Google it. And if there was a contract in that amount, I'll find exactly what I'm looking for because it's on Google. So next I said, well, I've already done that and there wasn't any information on Google at all for any type of contract work or road work contracts between K5 and Village of Dolton or any for that matter. Then it got weird. So she immediately stiffened up and she gave me a response that sounded like she was reading off of a script. She was speaking slowly and carefully, almost robotically. And she said, K5 Construction only does contract work that goes through the normal bidding process where there is an RFP and we are awarded the contract as the low bidder. We do not do contracts that don't involve the competitive bidding process along with full disclosure. I was like, oh boy. So then I apologetically said that, well, hey, I was just trying to alert you guys because I didn't think that a reputable company like theirs would get mixed up in any scandals dealing with the village of Dolton. And then she repeated the entire canned statement again, word for word. So realizing that this was a complete dead end and that this lady was covering for the company, I thanked her for the clarification, repeated my statement that I was just trying to do the right thing and informed them, and then I got off the phone. So that's it. My investigative work is done. Now then, I've drawn my conclusions. Can you draw your own conclusions? I'm not going to say anything out loud or mention any names because I definitely don't want any of these goons from South Chicago coming knocking on my door. Okay? Now, let's just go over some realizations and keep it in general terms to wrap it up. We all know that Chicago is the corruption capital of the United States. It's even worse than New York City. We all know that you don't get any contract work without getting involved in the pay-for-play game. You know, kickbacks. We know that there is no way that a check like that could have been cashed without the company's endorsement signature on the back of it. And we know that there's no way that a little hood check cashing shop would have $500,000 of cash sitting around for customers to walk in and have. So let's just connect the DOTTS. What do you think happened? What's your final analysis? Do you think the mayor grabbed the $500,000 in cash and dashed and stashed it in her secret account somewhere, offshore or wherever? Or do you think that contractor deposited that check and maybe paid a gratuity for getting the job? Well, the bottom line is somebody is lying. But I'm not going to implicate anyone. I think you've got enough information to draw your own conclusions. And I also think that I would love it if you would like, comment, and subscribe to the Go Political channel. And I would appreciate it if you would click the notification bell and tell a few friends who you think would enjoy this video as much as you did. So come and check back with my YouTube homepage and make sure that you're not missing out on anything because I've got some really good stuff coming your way, including the next episode of the Dolton Chronicles. So that's about all I've got for this one, folks. I'm so glad that you were here. This is Carlton, and I am out.
Hard hat on, riding through the blocks and napping. Steel toes crunching on the gravel, be stacking. Paying the streets, boss man's making plays. Them trackers whispering, cause they know we get paid. Break it down, hands dirty, break it, cash is clean. Back exit right here, go collecting that green.